Hello, welcome back to Prospect, Kentucky. I'm Dr. Andrew DeGruccio, orthopedic surgeon and amateur mixologist. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Bourbon and Books with the Doctor. This is the Sunday, March 29th, 2020 edition, just to get you oriented to the day and the date. And for Sunday, I'm going to try to teach you a very simple bourbon cocktail. As you'll see in many of my cocktails, they have a simple theme. Most of the time I prefer to use bourbon, and I try to make it as simple as possible because I don't want to take too long making the cocktail for myself. I got things to do. So tonight's cocktail is one I came up with that I call the Manhattan Peach. It's basically just a derivative of a standard Manhattan. In a Manhattan, we usually have bourbon, sweet vermouth, and bitters. For my Manhattan Peach, I simply substitute the sweet vermouth with peach schnapps. That way we still have the bourbon and we have a sweet peachy flavor that kind of takes the Manhattan out of New York and moves it down to Georgia. So let's make our cocktail super easy. I'm going to take my graduated mixer, and today's bourbon that I'm going to feature is going to be my Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit. I'm going to take 2 ounces of that. And then I'm going to take my peach schnapps, and I'm just going to take 1 ounce of that. I don't want to overwhelm the bourbon. That should be enough. And I always like to add some bitters. Tonight I've selected blackstrap. I think it mixes well with the peach schnapps. It won't overpower it. Ladow, just like that. And we will throw some ice cubes in there to start opening up our bourbon. Give it a nice stir. Again, as you'll see in my videos, I don't think most bourbon cocktails need shaking. They just need a good stirring. Again, we're not barbarians. These are sophisticated cocktails. We'll stir that up. As usual, I've taken my glass. I've taken one of my large square ice cubes, and I've already melted it a bit. Let me get rid of any excess water. I don't want to water down my cocktail. I've stirred that a little bit. Let's go ahead and pour that right over our large ice cube, which will start to float. And that will almost fill that glass almost entirely. And then I think what goes well with peach is, of course, fresh mint. Fresh mint isn't quite in season right now, so I had to buy this. And I'm going to smack it to open it up because we're going for the aromas, and we're going to put that right there on top of the ice. There's our Manhattan Peach. We get peach aromas off of that. We get mint aromas, a little bit of blackstrap bitters. But it tastes terrific. Absolutely wonderful version of a Manhattan. Not too complicated to make, very simple. So since I've made a cocktail that kind of brings me down to the South, for today's book, I've picked one of my true crime books that I recently enjoyed called In Plain Sight. This is a fascinating, quick little reading book about the Kaufman County prosecutor murders from 2013 down in Texas. It's a case where a very well-known lawyer in a smaller town who becomes one of the justices of the peace falls out of favor with the district attorney because of political reasons, and then he starts killing people. And they all know he did it, but they can't really arrest him because he's a lawyer and he knows how to slow down the prosecution. So it takes months for them to bring him to justice. So it's a fascinating read, and it's something that I vaguely remember from news stories, but reading this book put it all together very nicely. Lots of twists and turns, a good, quick weekend read to enjoy with the Manhattan Peach. So again, that's our cocktail and our book for Sunday, March 29th, 2020. We're still at the beginning of this coronavirus quarantine isolation. We've got a lot more days to go. I hope that I still have enough cocktails in me to keep going on these videos for a while. I'd like to point out that I'm wearing another one of my concert t-shirts tonight. People that watch these videos know that I like my bourbon cocktails. I like my nonfiction books, but I also like concerts. And I'd like to plug Vintage Trouble here, an excellent group that sings R&B, rock and roll, old-timey music, and a terrific live performing band out of LA. So if you get a chance to catch Vintage Trouble, do it. I'd like to take this time to shout out to our local facilities that I frequent for my concerts. Mercury Ballroom, who I'm sure is hurting just like all the rest of us, Louisville Palace, Iroquois Amphitheater, all the greatest places to catch a live concert here locally in Louisville. And as soon as we're out of this quarantine, I'm going to be looking for concert venues again. In any case, this is Sunday. Have a good night. We're starting the week. Probably not a lot of work to return to this coming week, but do the best you can. Keep yourself busy, isolated, quarantine, wash your hands, and we'll get through this together.